Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back another video from Broken Ruin. Today we're gonna check out, is Sukuna too strong for Jujutsu Kaisen? And it's looking like it. Chapter 253. Like, just don't know what's gonna happen next. I don't know what's gonna happen next. I really feel like, and I hope it does happen, so I wouldn't mind seeing this, the villain winning. That would be boss, but there's been no sign of, like, the author saying it's coming to an end, so. But then again, I don't want some random ass pull out of nowhere to just save everyone. Do you know what I mean? But Sukuna's just. It doesn't matter who keeps coming at him, it's like, bam! Even. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll wait until see what's mentioned in this, and then we can go from there. But yeah, chapter 253, I was just like, oh, how's this? Anyway.
Ryomen Sukuna has always been an overwhelming presence in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, being known as the strongest sorcerer in history, even from the very first chapters of the story. This buildup has only grown more and more potent as time and chapters have passed.
I mean, he's just been so cool from the beginning. He's been so sick. He's slick. He's slick.
Over the 250 plus chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, he's been hailed as a calamity, a force of nature, an evil presence, a sorcerer so strong that he could usher in the era of curses single-handedly, and
but he's obviously been defeated at some point in the past.
most importantly, a character that now stands alone as the honored one, surpassing even Satoru Gojo and currently decimating the students he works so hard to cultivate. This consistently terrifying portrayal has contributed to Sukuna being universally respected as an intimidating and threatening villain, worthy of being the final antagonist for this series. But one question lingers in the minds of fans as they see Sukuna unleash his wrath in the modern era. Is Sukuna too strong for Jujutsu Kaisen? Can the cast possibly defeat the strongest sorcerer?
I just don't see how now, but okay.
Who's even transcended the limitations of mortality itself. Today, I'll be going over all of the information and context regarding Sukuna and the main cast in order to answer this question once and for all.
Let's do it.
Since the conclusion of his battle with Satoru Gojo, Sukuna has done nothing but put on a dominant display as the strongest sorcerer to ever live.
Yeah, he has. I'll jump in. Doesn't matter who it is.
In isolation, I don't think many people would take issue with this reality.
Because you even think like, he must be tired after Gojo. No.
For the longest time, we've known that Sukuna would be an extremely dangerous foe to meet in the final arc. In fact, it's in the Shibuya incident arc where we really get a glimpse at how scary Sukuna's presence can be if he isn't on your side. And since then, he's regained his true form and honed his technique to the point that he's able to cleave not just your body, but the world, space, and
have those four arms fighting Gojo. It's like, whoa.
Dismantled. This is also the sorcerer who defeated Gojo and still obviously has enough left in the tank to continue battling. So every fan paying attention to the story so far expected Sukuna to be an opponent fierce enough to put the protagonist on the back foot. Despite this though, Sukuna seems to be developed, growing, and bearing his fangs at a level beyond what we expected. So from a very basic and visceral perspective, I can understand the concerns I've been seeing regarding his conclusion. Even now, Sukuna has been stated and demonstrated to be restraining himself, or at least not revealing all of his cards quite yet, despite defeating the only individual strong enough to be on a somewhat level playing field. But while I can understand and sympathize with this initial reaction, I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion that Sukuna's downfall must come from a plot convenience or Deus Ex Machina, nor—
Yeah, please don't. Like I said, I just don't want that to happen. Please do not be an asspull. I do not want an asspull for this.
Nor do I believe that Gege has created a
make it make sense
villain too strong for the world that he exists in. In order to explain why this is the case, I'll be breaking up my explanation into two separate parts. The first will mainly address the thematic and logistical reasons I think that he can and will be defeated, while the latter half focuses primarily on Sukuna's portrayal as an individual and why I think the Sukuna hype that people attribute to Gege is to be expected and well within reason for a character of Sukuna's importance to the story and caliber as a fighter. Now, as I mentioned before, I can acknowledge the source of people's doubts because Sukuna is currently on an absolutely legendary run.
Yeah, he is. He's just annihilating everybody.
Defeating Gojo, then Kashimo, dispatching Higuruma, defeating Yuta, and overwhelming Maki in quick succession.
Oh, that was the one. Okay, so we're on it. We're on it. Was not seeing this happening. I thought when Maki came in, I was like, she is the one that's going to fix all this. And then, no. Black Flash out of nowhere. Oh, no.
Absolutely ridiculous. And it certainly doesn't make him seem like a very defeatable opponent on the surface.
Especially if Maki's been taken down. Oh, my God.
With the best feat on his resume being the staggering defeat of the modern era's strongest sorcerer. Despite Sukuna pretty blatantly surpassing Gojo, though, I think it's crucial to remember that from the beginning of the story, the intention was for the students of Satoru to reach that same level, if not surpass it. This sentiment isn't one of little importance either, as Gojo himself has mentioned the potential of his students on numerous occasions. In chapter 11, he discusses his dream of fostering strong and competent allies, mentioning that Yuta, Hikari, and eventually Yuji were all students he foresaw becoming as strong as him. In chapter 18, he mentions to Yaga that the limitations of special grade won't apply to the next generation, in which Yuji and Yuta are two notable characters shown as examples. Even Todo, someone who based on our current information isn't likely to reach these heights, has significantly contributed to the survival of the sorcerers who will carry on Gojo's legacy.
Yeah, like, my God. Yeah.
Without Todo, Yuji dies in Shibuya, unable to overcome the grief of loss. And
mate, yeah, he would have just stood there and be like, none of his dead, and then he would have died. But then comes in, come on, bro, let's do this. Clap, 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 clap. Clap those hands and then those cheeks.
Guilt that he feels for taking lives. So if Itadori goes on to become a force unbound by the concept of special grade, it's fair to say that Todo is a massive contributor to that fact. Definitely. In chapter 58 and 117, the hype continues as Gojo either hints or explicitly states that Megami's potential, technique, and talent is great enough to put him on that esteemed level as well. And you even have more recent examples of new gen sorcerers like Higuruma getting explicit talent comparisons.
Oh, he nearly had it. He nearly had it. It was so close.
To Gojo himself. Time and time and time.
So many, like, teasy moments at the end of chapters, and you're like, oh, and then the next chapter is like, no.
Time again. The story has reinforced the idea that nearly every opponent that Sukuna is facing is a budding flower just waiting for the right circumstances to bloom and reach their full potential. What's amazing for the main cast is that Sukuna's temperament is the one perfect to force evolution. With how strong Sukuna is, if he were a different person who was more cautious and less playful, everyone in the story would be dead already. It's okay to admit that our protagonists are currently hanging on by a thread explicitly because of Sukuna's established personality and overwhelming hedonism. We've seen this hedonistic attitude already allow a sorcerer like Higuruma to bear fruit in his sorcerer training and develop not only a domain amplification that he can use as skillfully as Sukuna, but also reverse curse technique quality enough to regrow an entire limb solely because Sukuna saw Higuruma as something to be toyed with.
Yeah, because he's not, from what I can remember, because my memory's awful, he's not been able to do that for, has it been like 5 years? He's very fresh to it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I'm sorry, but like, yeah.
Rather than an enemy to be...
My memory is off when it comes to this stuff.
...be cut down for his survival. This is important to note as a set precedent within the series, because it goes hand in hand with the many awakenings we've seen characters have by being pushed to the brink of death by an opponent significantly more powerful and ruthless than they are. Some awakenings have a bit more training and specific effort put behind them, while some stem exclusively from a reframing of the mind. But what remains consistent is how often they occur and how dramatically they can change the course of a battle.
When she... Oh, that was so cool.
The most obvious example comes from Gojo in Hidden Inventory, as despite Toji being physically superior to the point of not sustaining any damage against pre-awakened Gojo, immediately following his awakening with no real time for recovery aside from RCT usage, Gojo was able to immediately outclass Toji, take no hits, and erase him with one swift hollow purple.
Bam.
With just reverse curse technique as a concept being grasped, Gojo was able to find the core of curse energy and rapidly accelerate his rate of growth. Maybe you're thinking that this example is an unfair one because Gojo is Gojo. And sure, that's a fair point to bring up until you remember that a majority of the main characters who've gone against Sukuna in this final stretch have all awakened before against opponents significantly stronger than them. Maki has strengthened her heavenly restriction twice. Yuta was able to overcome the skill and experience gap against Geto through Rage and a Binding Vow. Yuji has enhanced his manipulation of cursed energy significantly numerous times in the story. Megami was able to open a domain immediately following a Finger Bearer's oppressive attacks. Higuruma discovered RCT seconds after needing it, as well as a domain amplification just because he saw it once. Hell, Even Choso was able to expand his blood manipulation technique when in Dire Straits against Kenjaku, and he was only meant to be the warm-up before Yuki came to seal the deal. The current circumstances may seem hopeless. It may look like our favorite characters are cooked every chapter, and we're
God, like, this guy's like, I was gonna run away. I was gonna leave, but okay, looks like I gotta step up now.
And to some extent, I do think that's the case. Sukuna is too strong for the current era right now, but that doesn't mean he'll always be, and it doesn't mean that it's inconsistent if he gets surpassed.
So do you reckon, I hope they don't do this, do you reckon there's gonna be like a time skip or something? Sukuna decides he wants to like do something and then, I hope not.
Nor is he too strong for the universe of Jujutsu Kaisen.
No, of course he's not, because he's been defeated already, hence why he's back again and collecting fingers and
he
stuff.
Hasn't transcended the limitations of what a sorcerer or even just combatant in general in this world can be. Maybe you could say that the protagonists so far have never overcome a gap this big in such a short amount of time, but that's just the nature of final climactic battles. And for sorcerers, it's also very rare that they're able to work together for such a long time against such an imposing threat. So if one person's awakening isn't enough, how about two? Or three, or four.
Everybody.
Gojo fought Sukuna alone, and he lost. But he was also trying to usher in an era of sorcerers that didn't allow for the loneliness he felt or the despair that Geto felt. And although he died before being able to see that future come to fruition, that doesn't mean
we still passed on a legacy.
That Gojo failed. It doesn't mean that he won't be right in the end. What also lends to this idea quite heavily is the fact that many of the heavy hitters we currently see bucking against Sukuna already surpass Satoru in one way or another. Yuta has cursed energy levels beyond what Gojo had. Higuruma a level of domain amplification on par with Sukuna. Hikari has the quickest healing speed in the series. Maki has eliminated and shaved everything away to become a deadly weapon focused purely on destruction. And Yuji's soul remains absolutely unbreakable in the face of Sukuna's might. These five fighters don't have what it takes individually, at least not yet, to fully surpass the strongest sorcerers in the verse, but they do have the foundation necessary. They have the grit, talent, and capacity to flourish and become something that even puts an end to Ryoma and Sukuna.
Yeah, but then what's going to happen to let them have that opportunity to do that? Do you reckon Sukuna's going to be that much of a... that confident, he goes, I'm going to give you 3 years to train and come fight me, and then we have a time skip.
Yeah. Jujutsu Kaisen isn't a nickname that came out of nowhere, and with the occupation of sorcerer coming with the burden of carrying legacies, I think it entirely makes sense that the main cast is able to pull through now in ways that they have been before, but on a much larger scale. If the thought of these characters surpassing Sukuna doesn't sit right with you, you're free to feel that way. I mean, I'm not your dad, but just ask why this time is different from all of the other times that these sorcerers, these characters we followed for so long, were able to randomly and seemingly just immediately achieve a level of strength and capacity that they didn't have before. The stakes are higher, the opponent is stronger, but they are also more experienced and more powerful than they were at any other point in the story. Many good sorcerers, many good characters have died to get this far, and I'm sure more will die at the hands of Sukuna before all is said and done, but in one way or another, these characters have persevered and far surpassed the limitations that existed for them before. Narratively and thematically, I don't view Sukuna as an opponent that's too strong for the series, because I still see a path, a future in which who we have on the field right now can contend with the King of Curses. In the most recent chapter of the story, actually, Maki was able to impress Sukuna so much that he not only admitted to being given a role for the first time in his entire life, but he was also so dialed in that he was able to land a Black Flash, an ability that occurs exclusively when a sorcerer has discarded all irrelevant thoughts to focus purely on the battle itself. If Maki can do that alone, who's to say that upon her return with backup from Yuta, Yuji, Kusakabe, Choso, whoever you think is coming back into the fray, that they can't continue to press the issue. It may seem a bit optimistic, given the fact that Kusakabe is currently the last remaining sorcerer on the battlefield, but I have faith in the work Gojo and his students put in. I have faith that they'll rise to the occasion when the world needs them most, just as they have in the past. Will the events play out so simply in actuality? Only time can tell, but right now I still see Sukuna as someone that can be beaten, someone that can be killed, because for all of the hype he's been getting, and all of the impressive things he's been doing, he still has a hole in his chest, no domain, and a severely beaten body.
Yeah, he's been beaten down to a degree. It's like, oh, come on guys, just keep going.
Slowly but surely, Sukuna's being whittled down, and the fact that he was so focused on Maki that he was able to be chosen by these sparks of black demonstrates that very fact. Him reaching 120% of his full capabilities is certainly something that is going to make this battle much tougher. But even Gojo was defeated after landing numerous consecutive black flashes and having his potency return. While these sparks are potent, that doesn't make them the end-all, be-all in a fight. Now, if you transfer your interpretation of this entire discussion from one of themes, narrative consistency, and character development to one of purely in-universe logistics, I understand and even somewhat agree with the sentiment that defeating Sukuna will take an act of God significantly more than I do otherwise. I have some vague ideas about Sukuna's defeat and how it can tangibly be brought about, but even those ideas are much too nebulous to call a specific and bulletproof strategy. If you watched some of my theories before, you know I believe pretty heavily in Megumi returning and being a key player in Sukuna's defeat, and Yuji developing Sukuna's techniques on top of the blood manipulation, soul punches, and reverse curse technique he has now might just be enough to even the scales a little bit. The story started with Yuji, Megumi, and Sukuna, and I'm extremely convinced that the series will end with those three characters as well. This is all well and good, but only half of the conversation needed to be had about Sukuna's portrayal recently. While I think I've done a pretty good job at establishing consistency and precedence for sorcerers in precarious situations overcoming their adversity, what I haven't properly addressed so far is all of the praise and hype that Gege is delivering to Sukuna through the narrative. Is he overdoing it? Is he making the defeat of Sukuna seem impossible to write a satisfying conclusion for? And at the end of the day, is Gege showing Sukuna favoritism in his depiction of his strength?
Why not?
Whether or not you think that Jujutsu Kaisen is starting to turn into Sukuna Kaisen, or that Gege is really glazing Sukuna, is going to depend on a couple of things.
Like, I'm a huge fan of villains. I've in the past wrote like notes for my own things if I was to ever be in the position of putting out my own ideas for mangas and that, and I always end up putting a huge potential on, like, huge point on my villain, because I feel like a good villain really makes a good show.
The first thing hinges on the idea that you hated or at least found boring all of the flattery and adulation given to characters like Gojo over the years of the story, with the second factor being based on a somewhat limited view of the series due to the week-by-week format of manga. The second factor is a bit more complicated to broach and actually flows pretty nicely if we just follow this in chronological order, so we'll tackle the significantly simpler first factor. And to avoid sugarcoating the issue, I'm just gonna say it flat out. Everything that Gege has been saying or showing off with Sukuna is extremely deserved and almost required due to him basically doing the same thing with Gojo over the course of Jujutsu Kaisen. For every Sukuna's a calamity statement, there is one that exists out there hailing Gojo as the strongest.
Yeah, that's true.
For every claim that he isn't going all out, one that places Gojo in divine company can counter. Due to Gojo's loss, I can somewhat understand being forgetful or even outright dismissing this prior hype, but don't let the hate that Gege mentions for Gojo in the author's comments fool you. Satoru was absolutely gassed to the moon and back in ways that would have fans of the series call Gege an even bigger fan of Sukuna than Arame if he dropped that right now. Saying that the birth of Gojo caused the balance of the world to be altered is insane. Having Toji as a grown man intimidated by the six eyes wielded by a child is insane. Having Geto question whether Gojo's identity is linked to strength or vice versa is insane. Gojo being able to use his techniques constantly for a decade straight is insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And at the risk of sounding a bit rude or mean-spirited, I have to say that if you were cool with all that, with Gojo just creating a point 2 domain off vibes, with Gojo shrinking and expanding his barriers off vibes, with Gojo healing his technique off vibes, respectfully, you're just gonna have to hold that the Sukuna hype is here to stay until he gets defeated.
Yeah.
You already bought into the Gege school.
Yeah, definitely. If you're on board with everything that Gojo did, then why are you not on board with the Sukuna
character gassing? The most relative example to Sukuna is Gojo in this scenario, and even then, from a purely strength and Jujutsu standpoint, Sukuna is more deserving of this praise than Gojo. What Gojo was always praised for was his strength, his capabilities as a sorcerer, and his ability to instill fear in his enemies and confidence in his allies. The very notion of making a comment on any other feature of his was pretty moot because they were all hidden from others by the suffocating nature of his strength. Because of this, it follows that the guy who overwhelmed even him through sheer jujutsu skill is going to be praised in those same ways even more. Sukuna beat that guy. Sukuna beat the prior honored one and is now fighting the last remnant of the strongest sorcerers on the planet and having the time of his life. If there's any person in this story at this current time that deserves a lot of praise, that deserves a lot of hype, that deserves a lot of payoff to the buildup he's been receiving, it is Ryomen Sukuna. I get it. Sukuna's the villain. He's the antagonist. He's the guy that the fan base likes a lot less than Gojo, but he's more than earned his own hype and respect. He's more than earned the right to be gassed in the same way that Gojo was. If you weren't in favor of calling Gege a Gojo Glazer, you're just gonna have to bite the bullet on this one and hold that, because there's no reason that Gege would switch up his writing style this late into the game. The short-sightedness that I see people have with Satoru somewhat bleeds into my second point, or the second factor that contributes quite heavily to the issues I think people have with Sukuna, namely that they forget he really only has this final fight, and whatever this fight follows up with, to establish himself as an antagonist that lived up to all of the build-up. For 211 chapters straight, the terror that Sukuna represented had only been seen in small increments. The destruction that he was truly capable of causing was only limited due to the strength of Yuji Itadori as a vessel, and even then, Sukuna was a calamitous force that was easily able to kill hundreds of civilians in a single fight. From chapter 12, his plan to escape from the bonds of Yuji was hinted at, and until chapter 212, fans of the story were simply waiting for the ball to drop, waiting for Sukuna to finally take center stage and steal our focus. Since then, the spotlight has really been on Sukuna, and I think his integrity as a villain will be much better for it when everything is said and done in this story. It's easy to say that Gege is overdoing it right now, but if Sukuna showed us anything less than this, I'd be disappointed, and I'm sure even the people complaining about him now would see just how unfulfilling not exploring this character to the limit would be. Keep in mind, Gojo got the same praise, the same hype, the same demonstrations of overwhelming skill that Sukuna is getting now, and in the end, he was still defeated. I don't know why people think it's impossible for the same thing to happen.
This is very valid.
And in a manga where characters not reaching their full potential or getting to stay in the limelight for a long time is a pretty prevalent criticism, I thought that Gege actually allowing Sukuna to bask in his own power and importance would be respected and admired. It's the same style that many of the greats have used in their own works, and I think it makes sense for Gege to use it in his. Antagonists like Madara, Aizen, Meruem, and Frieza only have the oppressive presence that they do on screen because the author was willing to unabashedly gas them up, show how strong they are, and make them seem like impossibly powerful foes before the cathartic end that they all met. As a massive fan of all the antagonists and all the stories that they stem from, having Sukuna follow in their footsteps doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world to me. If you think that Gege's character writing with Sukuna is flawed or lacking, that's a totally different story, and I might make a video breaking down how Sukuna's character is playing out, some of its flaws and many of its strengths, but Sukuna being too strong for the Jujutsu Kaisen universe just isn't something I see being true given where we are in the narrative right now. Sukuna seems overwhelming, but I have trust in the characters I've grown to love over the course of the story, and Gege himself to stick the landing with his conclusion, and assumably the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole. Maybe I'll be wrong in the end, but when it comes to theorizing, I don't have the worst track record in the world, so I'm certainly not worried. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more anime and manga analysis like this, subscribe and hit the bell. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Very cool. Yeah, alright, fair. So maybe he's not too strong for the verse, because, yeah, like I said, every other shonen out there has had these big bads that have been built up to be so ridiculous. Like, alright, let's go to Dragon Ball Z. Super Saiyan didn't exist. And then Frieza kills Krillin, then Goku goes, ah! And then it's like, whoa, ah, nowhere. And it's like, ah, it's insane. It's so cool. And it matches with everything that we've seen with power-ups and stuff. So, you never know. But I'm just intrigued to see what happens next. So, yeah, it's not everyone's dead. Just people have been beaten out. The Maki one was big for me, but that was fun. That was cool. More Broken Ronin reactions to be enjoyed in the future. But until then, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, links in the description to the Patreon page. And if you want to watch Patreon-only reactions, I'm watching Solo Leveling and the original Dragon Ball series. That's also, in the same tier. $1 a month is the last support channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that. And thank you guys for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys. So, guys, next time.